So hello everyone, welcome to our very first of this year's Webinar Wednesdays for dance professionals brought to you by The Place. My name is Neve Harrington and I take a role at The Place called Artist Associate. I'll just give you a quick visual description so you can locate me. So I'm a white woman in my 30s. I've got a short brown, almost like a bowl cut haircut. I'm wearing a kind of soft yellow and pink patterned jacket, and I'm sitting in a white room at The Place with a poster of the Place Prize from several years ago behind me. And I use she, her pronouns. So I am delighted to be joined by Ella Tighe today, who's going to lead our session about celebrating disco queens, exploring community engaged practice in an underrepresented dance form. So Ella will introduce herself in just a moment and we'll get going with the session. But before we do that, just a little housekeeping information to make sure that everyone's comfortable and that this is as accessible an experience as possible. So English captions are available if that's something that you would like to make use of. You can find possibly at the bottom of your screen, depending on your Zoom settings, or possibly at the top, should be a button for you to press, which will activate captioning. Great. You may also have noticed that we're joined today by two BSL interpreters. We've got Lauren and Caroline. So they will be with us throughout the session and they'll be changing every 15 minutes or so. You should be able to pin them to your screen if you can't see them and that's something that you'd like to make use of. I'll just give you a moment to do that. And then if you have any questions or comments throughout the session, we're really welcoming of those. There'll be time for discussion at the end. You can pop those in the chat at any point and we'll pick them up and we'll track them as we go. You can ask a question or you can share a thought. You can do that throughout, or we can come to that at the end. When it comes to the end of the session, sharing questions, you can do that in whatever way is comfortable for you. So if you're a BSL user and you'd like to sign your question, you're really welcome to do that. And we will have Caroline or Kaz interpret that for others. You can use the raise hand function just to draw attention to yourself, or you can type into the comments and we'll come to you at the end. If you're not a BSL user, you can either type your question or comment.
It's because Jess is coming back up in a minute and I'm doing this.
Or you can use the chat function. And in the background, my colleague Polly Day will be checking the chat along with me throughout, so we can come to all of your interactions with Ella's topic. So that's the housekeeping bit over and done with. We've got until 3 p.m. So I'm going to pass over to Ella, who is going to give us a brief introduction, pronouns, audio description, and then we get into it. Hi, Ella.
Hi, thanks, Neve, and thank you to The Place for having me for this webinar. I'm really excited to share with you all, this strand of my work. So yeah, I'm Ella. And visual description, so I am a white, pale, unfortunately freckled woman in my early 30s. I've got auburn, long and lots of hair, which is admittedly quite wild today. And I am sat in front of a kind of lilac grey wall, wearing a leopard print shirt. So yeah, thank you for coming. And just a note on how I'm going to use my presentation today. So there will be images on some slides and there will be text on other slides. On the slides with the text, don't feel that you have to read it. I'm going to read it. So of course, if it helps you to read it, you're welcome to, but just know that it's not additional information as such. So I just want to begin by giving a little context really to where this community engaged part of my work began. So I'm an independent dance artist. I've worked in contemporary dance for my kind of working career. And that's really important to know, just in terms of how I position myself, or how I am positioned with the freestyle dance community. I don't work in freestyle dance. I haven't been involved in it for a decade. So it's kind of a re-entry back to working with those communities. But I am an ex-freestyle competitor. I was involved in disco freestyle from being 6 to about 19 years old. And that was the only exposure I had to dance until I got to GCSE and A-level dance at school. So I don't really consider myself to be a community-based practitioner, which is really interesting when we were coming up with like the language for the title of this presentation. But when I started making my new show, which is called Disco Queen, and it's a solo, it's an autobiographical work about my experience of coming through disco freestyle and growing up in that world, I wanted to really reflect the young freestyle dancers who are part of that culture and that community now. And so I decided that I wanted to undertake interviews and develop a relationship with the current freestyle communities in order to, reflect their experiences, because mine was very different. I was part of it in the early noughties, and it's obviously evolved a lot since then. And I wanted it to be so that when they came to see the work, it felt relevant to them and not just all about me as such. So what is disco freestyle? During making and doing this work, I've found that a lot of people think they know what it is, but actually when they reflect what that is back to me, it's not what it is. So I thought I'd just take a little time to outline this for you, because it is a little bit elusive, because it's in and of its own world. So it is a competitive form of dance that evolved from the 1970s disco dancing era. So it evolved from the film Saturday Night Fever, starring the lovely John Travolta, who you should see on your screens. And so people wanted to learn these routines that were part of this film, and that's how disco dancing began. And in the disco dancing days, it was known for its connection to pop songs, the body pulsations, the funky arm and leg movements, lots of hip thrusts. And from that point all the way through till now and moving forward, it's been pioneered by a lady called Anna Jones, who is known as the godmother of freestyle dance. She's been involved with it from its very inception. Now, over the decades, it's evolved into freestyle. Routines in freestyle, in fast, go around a dance floor in an anti-clockwise direction. So if you see the image on the right-hand side, which is a competition space, the dancers run around the outside of the space, passing past judges who will mark their number down to put them through to the next section. And the routines are comprised of high kicks, spins, big jumps, leaps, turns, and acrobatic movements. And freestyle really is a form which is underpinned by flexibility and speed. And it's about being precise and executing movements to the best of your ability. And of course, it can be recognised for its over-the-top costumes, makeup, fake tan, big hair, rhinestones, glitter. There's not much of that it leaves out, to be honest. Now, at a competition, the sections are in categories, so in age and ability. So for example, you'll have under 6, under 8, under 10, under 12, which will go right up to adult. And then your ability level is beginner, starter, intermediate, champ, and then premier champ. So that's the best of the best of the best. And you move up the ranks by winning. So you lose lives, you lose free lives, or grade points, as some people call them, which you will either get through a win or a second or a third if there's enough people dancing in your heat on that particular day. Competitions happen across the UK on most Sundays, and they vary from your small trophy day to your championship events. And big festivals like VIP, Fearless, the World Championships, the British Championships, and the legendary Disco Kid King Queen, which you can see in the image. They're the big ones, and they all take place at Blackpool, which is kind of the spiritual home of freestyle. And also, just to add about the routines, you've got 40 seconds on the dance floor. That's all the time you've got to impress a judge and get round all the judges. So I'm going to show you a visual and audio reference in the next slide to freestyle. It might be loud, so just to give you a warning on that.
I'll smile, what it takes to fool this town. I'll do it till the sun goes down, and I'll put the night down. Oh yeah, oh yeah, I'll tell you what you want here. Keep my sunglasses and my jacket, now we're the right time.
So that's the music that you dance a fast solo to. So there are different events at competitions, but the main ones that are most popular are the fast solos and the slow dance solos. Slow dance is more to lyrical pop songs, but even though it says slow dance, it's still very fast because it's still freestyle. So how would we define this community? It's mainly young girls under 20, but it's not exclusive to girls. There are boys who compete, and they usually compete in separate sections that are boys' sections. It's predominantly white working class communities, often in small towns, and consequently, they fall into a lot of arts councils, priority places like Mansfield, Blackpool, Barnsley, Rotherham, and there's a big representation of freestyle communities in the north. This is children from 4 to 20 years old, and I think it's important to acknowledge here that they train together, they do their classes together, so you will have a 4-year-old in with the oldest person in the dance school as well. It's private dance schools, and that could range from a dance teacher teaching a class in a village hall, a church hall, a leisure centre, or if they're lucky, potentially having their own dedicated studio space. This is most likely the only way these children will engage with dance. So we're not talking about children who do ballet, tap, jazz, everything. It's all freestyle because it's really very all-encompassing and demanding. You're talking, a couple of evenings a week training 4 hours at a time, a Saturday morning, and then on a Sunday you're at a competition. And the dance teachers are people who have probably grown up through freestyle. They've come through the form. They've set up their own business. They maybe work a 9 to 5 in something not related to dance, and they teach dance on the evenings and the weekends. But that being said, it's 100% their life. It's not a kind of side hustle. It's just they usually don't have the means to do it as a full-time job as such. So my values and intentions when I started working with the freestyle community. So I wanted my project to be collaborative and not competitive. Competition is just embedded at every single part of freestyle. Schools are competing against one another. You have dancers at the same dance school who'll be in the same sections. You're going to competitions, and it's just about winning. And that kind of creates a little bit of a kind of who's good, who's bad, who's not good enough, who's the best costume designer, who would you not want to get a costume from language, which I don't feel so comfortable with actually. So I wondered if in doing this project I could open up some of these freestyle schools and dancers to a different way of working, which would be more collaborative. I wanted to expose these dancers to other ways of working with dance. So freestyle is about execution. It's about how good can you do a movement, and if it's good enough, it'll go in your routine. I wanted to expose them to ways of working which were more artistic and creative other than just executing the movement. I wanted to encourage a cross-dance form exchange between myself and the dancers. So I wasn't looking at it just as what I can take from them. This was pretty much the only opportunity I would get to be exposed to freestyle actually as it is now, because there's not freestyle dance classes for adults. It's not as if I could just go and take a class. So encouraging what they could get from me and what I could get from them. A huge part of this for me is advocating for freestyle. So freestyle is kind of deemed less than other dance forms. It's got a lot of negative narratives and stereotypes that have been built around the form. And instead of, you know, taking a critical approach to the form, as some people might do, I wanted to celebrate and advocate for freestyle, particularly within contemporary dance, which is why spaces like this via the place feel extremely valuable and significant for this work. And I wanted to present the stories that are not seen on Channel 4 documentaries. So on those documentaries, they tend to focus on the pushy parent. So there's a really famous lady who said, you don't dance with your kidney, you dance with your legs, to her daughter when her daughter had a kidney infection before one of the biggest competitions. So it tends to focus on like the real extremes in the form, you know, the fiercely competitive children, the tan, like the kind of problematic areas. Whereas I want to talk about the underdog, why some of those things to do with costume and makeup make it distinct to that particular culture, and the sense of support and community that is built through the form, and what that means for these kids as they grow up. So I was lucky enough to get Arts Council funding. So I had a project plan, I had my timeline. And my needs as an artist were that I wanted to do interviews that would be used as research and also within the show itself. And then I also wanted to facilitate engagement workshops with freestyle dancers. You'd probably expect, because it's dance and what I'm offering is dance, that they would take that up, that they'd be automatically interested. But actually that's not the case at all, because they're so focused on competition and training for competitions that beyond that is sort of a little bit, it's outside of what they do really. So some of the initial barriers or challenges were that I wasn't known to these freestyle dancers. I was not a freestyle celebrity myself, which happens within this form. And I haven't danced on the West End or in a cruise ship, which is kind of their version of what it is to be successful. If I asked any dance teachers about what their students had gone on to do, the only ones who they would mention are those people who have had those opportunities, not the ones who might have gone and, you know, worked in outreach or in contemporary dance. And that's because freestyle communities don't have an understanding of our sector, the contemporary dance, the arts and cultural sector. They don't understand the publicly funded landscape and the opportunities that could be there for them. They're very much in their own world. And the freestyle community are protective over freestyle because, I mean, it's not recognised. There's all these negative narratives. So it didn't really surprise me that people would be quite guarded and wonder why I would want to be involved with them. Of course, the competition at every, you know, embedded within the form was also a barrier, because it's a little bit like they try to locate you based on, for example, where I danced 10 years ago, rather than who I am now as an artist. And then yeah, this is something which will come up a bit later on, but scheduling. So I've got my project plan of when I want things to happen, but the reality of a freestyle school is that you've probably got a couple of evenings a week and a Saturday, and maybe those evening slots are 2 hours and they're training for a competition in those 2 hours. So when was it going to happen? So one thing that really supported some of these challenges is that early on in the project, myself and my fabulous producer, Sarah, who you can see in the image, went to see Anna Jones. We interviewed her as part of the work. And yeah, as I mentioned earlier, she's a pioneer of this form. She's written 2 books on freestyle, which are basically the only archived material that there is on the form. She runs the World Freestyle Championships and the British Championships, and she's well respected within freestyle. She's won lots of accolades like the Carl Allen Dance Awards and things like this. So Anna was really supportive of the project, actually. She has been all along. She's allowed us to go into these competition spaces and has put us in touch with other people. And that developed a sense of trust with the freestyle community. So if I would mention Anna's name, it was like, oh, okay, then you must be doing something good if Anna's involved. Yes, so this massively supported the project. So then to develop the relationships with the dance schools, you know, when you're writing an Arts Council bid, you'll be looking to say like, you know, I think we'd engage with 3 dance schools, which we did in the end. But because it was tricky in the beginning to kind of make those connections and get in the door, just be in those spaces, I decided to start small and local and invest time into one dance school like it was a pilot, and then I'd work from there. And the way I did that was I built a relationship with a particular dance school called Bingley Dance Studio, and their teacher was competing at the same time I was competing. She was a few years ahead of me. So I could kind of situate myself within her world. Actually, she remembered me, things like this. We had some mutual friends because it's local, and that was really useful, you know, having a team of myself. I'm an ex-freestyle dancer, obviously, and my producer Sarah is also an ex-freestyle dancer, and I think that's really served us in being able to bring that knowledge and experience of when we were doing it, whilst also being respectful about the fact that we haven't been doing it for some time. So, you know, I would make references to like what was happening when I was in freestyle and things like this, different people we would know. I'd always use language which they would know of. So I tried to stay away from complicated and strategic language because it's not helpful to them, you know. Even for me to say, oh, the place is supporting my work, they don't know who the place are, they don't know any of these, you know, organizations or people or funding bodies that we might use to endorse our work. So that was never really a possibility, but I tried to explain it to them in simpler terms. I would always fit into their schedule rather than expecting them to set up extra things. So in a way, I had to surrender my own schedule in order to do that. I took it really, really, really slow, and I would first go and have a conversation with the teacher and spend time in their space, observing when they were taking class and just being around so that the dancers could see me in their space and get to know me a bit without kind of jumping in at the deep end and delivering a workshop straight away. I made sure that in my Arts Council bid, any costs related to the project, relating to me going in and doing an interview, like space hire, because you're talking about people who run an independent business, they probably hire the space. Space hire, the teacher's time, any admin time, if I was asking the teacher to, you know, be giving me consent forms back, things like this would all come back to our project. And it would also I would pay people as we would pay them via our, rates, which is more than what they would get probably from teaching a dance class themselves. So some things that I had to be mindful of when I went and did the interviews. So it absolutely could not disrupt competition training. So if there was a big competition coming up in 2 weeks, it wasn't going to happen before then. It had to fit in with quieter times in order to not disrupt that. The question of when, so as I mentioned earlier, having limited time and access meant that usually the teachers would ask me to come along to their competition class, which was fine, but it meant that the kids were in the class and I was pulling them out one by one to have an interview. And I'm going to get to this in a bit, but it might be just a single dance studio. We're not talking about a big building with lots of different rooms that you can access. So yeah, I'd spent a lot of time basically with my sound producer understanding how to get the best possible audio for the show, and that went completely out of the window because I'm looking for a space in a dance studio when there's the music you heard earlier on, there's a dance teacher screaming, get your legs up, move faster. And yeah, the best solution was usually a cleaning cupboard. So that was a big learning point for me in terms of the expectations around that. Then the question of how many dancers I was going to interview and how they would be selected. So because competition is so high, the teachers face a lot of backlash in picking kids to do certain things. So I would suggest to the teacher, what would you prefer? Would you like me to pick and take that off your hands and then it's not your problem? Or do you want to choose? And usually they would say you choose, because otherwise I'm gonna get told I have my favorites. And collecting consent. So although that might sound like you just give someone a form, they return it. But firstly, it needed to be accessible in the language that it used for the freestyle community. And the other thing was, how do you get it from, when the freestyle community is not like professional in the use of email. So I was often DMing people on Instagram or Facebook Messenger, just because that's the way they engage and communicate. So the prospect of emailing parents wasn't really an option in most cases. It was more handing out the consent form on the day, getting the dance teacher to really bug them to bring it back, because the parents didn't have an issue in them being interviewed. They're just not used to filling out forms, even though it was just a simple signature. So there was kind of this, it was quite complicated in some cases to get the forms back. And then there was the actual questions that I was asking in the interviews. And of course, I'd like nicely mapped out these amazing questions that were going to get me the content that I wanted. And I forget that actually I'm interviewing some 5-year-olds, and to ask them to reflect about what it is to them to be a freestyle dancer was just such a shock for me. I remember like being sat there with this little girl who just did not understand what I was saying. And in order to then get what I wanted from her, I would say, okay, if freestyle is a colour, what colour would it be? It would be red because it's fiery and it's passionate and things like this. So I'm gonna now play a little bit of an interview for you to get a taste of what went on. So this is Dulcie, and she's 7 years old, and she's from Middleton in Leeds. How do you feel when you're dancing against the other girls in your section?
So like I'm going against my friend, and I feel a bit nervous because she's really good, but I just try and push myself, and the other girls are really good as well, so I just try and push myself more.
Nice. How do you feel when you don't get through?
I don't feel that sad, but sometimes I feel a bit sad because I've actually worked hard to try and get into the final.
Yeah. And what about when you do get into the final?
I get really excited. Even if I don't get first place, you still took part and you've still got a place.
Yeah, and you get a trophy. What's your favourite thing about competitions?
Like, you get to see other people dancing. Like, if they're really good, I think sometimes they should move up, but some judges say, nah, I don't think they should move up yet.
And what does it feel like for you to belong to your dance? That cut off slightly before the end, but you get a sense of it. So a significant point in doing some of this community engagement in terms of different modes that we could engage with was, after developing the relationship with Anna, I'd attended the World Freestyle Championships just to research and just to be in that space at Blackpool Winter Gardens. And we decided to go to the British Freestyle Championships. And I'd actually forgotten, because this turned into such a good situation, but it was all going wrong when it was happening. We actually had planned to do interviews and get visual material there. And a few days before the competition, we got told we couldn't have permissions. And that's because freestyle is really highly safeguarded, which is why you don't see it in the mainstream. But it's also what people don't understand about the questioning of the costumes. It is really highly safeguarded. So we decided we would go anyway. I had, you'll see that we had a stall in the image, and I had basically learned from my experience of being within that world, which is there's a lot of time when you're not dancing, because you're only on the dance floor for 40 seconds a couple of times throughout the day. And kids tend to be sat on the side colouring. So we decided to do a design your own freestyle costume colouring design thing. And also we did some very simple questions that they could fill in and put in a post box. When we were sat at the table, no one was coming to talk to us. So we decided we would just go sit somewhere else. And then we came back and there was loads of kids there, no sweets left. It'd been completely like, they'd all been busy doing lots of costume designs. And at the end of the day, they had filled that wall you can see in the image completely of costume designs. So here's a little bit of what they did. I don't know if you can read the answers to the questions, but I'll just read one out for you. So I want to win because if I win, it will encourage me to try and find a new costume just like mine that I drew. If I don't get through today, I will feel okay because I realise we will always have tomorrow, and we are going against all the different dance schools around Britain, and this is my first time here. So this was a really successful mode of engagement for us, because by the end of the weekend we'd engaged with 200 children. It was one day actually, not even a weekend. And of course my experience with working with one dance school in more depth and on a slower journey is incredibly valuable. But it was really extremely time consuming for me, and I had to then sort of manage the fact that when do I then do that with another dance school, and when do I do it with another dance school. Whereas in this instance, we kind of got a lot of the material we were needing for the project just on that one day. It was really self-sustaining. It felt really good to be a part of that space, and also it's a really good opportunity in the future for audience development and getting the kids excited about the show we're doing. And, you know, hopefully they will come and see it off the back of that. So then, yeah, I've done this slide. This is more about what they were saying, which, you know, it demonstrated what we already knew, really, which are these kids are really resilient and hardworking. They want to win, but if they don't win today, they'll go back to the studio and work hard for the next one. They want to make their family proud, and they acknowledge what their parents do for them to be in the freestyle world. They might be disappointed if they didn't get through, but they're happy for their friends, which was always quite moving, actually. And they felt proud to belong to their dance school, and they wanted to make their teachers proud. So by the time that I'd done all of this, I then had the workshops to do, which initially I had thought I would be doing at the beginning of the project, but it felt like the perfect point that they happened at the end, because actually I had developed trust with these dancers to be able to take them somewhere new through this workshop. So what I did with them in the workshop was I would always start with something familiar warm-up. I'd do a freestyle warm-up with them, which looks like a HIIT class, stamina, body conditioning, stretching. I'd use all the familiar music, so as you heard earlier, and then any of my own choreography would be to pop music, because that's what they dance to. I then move into some kind of strength-based acro stuff from the corner, which is more part of actually like my yoga practice. So it's not the acrobatics they do, but they really valued that because it gave them something different, the strength side, rather than just the flexibility. Then I would get them to creatively work with freestyle. So a very simple task. I would just ask them to make up a sequence of 5 movements. It needed to include a turn, something on the floor, a jump, and it should travel from this side of the room to that side of the room. Now, these kids never get the chance to make their own material. Like they're getting told what to do, and they love to show off. Freestylers absolutely love to show off. So if they get the opportunity to do what they really want to do, they're really up for it, and it worked really, really well. And then I would end with teaching them a sequence from the show I'm making, Disco Queen, which was contemporary dance meeting freestyle. And yeah, what was really interesting about that was I was kind of teaching a professional level sequence to 5 20-year-olds, 8-year-olds, and they totally went. I think if I did it at the beginning of the workshop, it wouldn't have been the best positioning, but because we'd gone through this journey of getting them more comfortable with me and how I work, they really enjoyed it. They really enjoyed the fact that it was more, they called it emotional. I wouldn't call my work emotional, but that was what they were feeling. They were accessing something with feeling. So, and also what was interesting was in the phrase work, if there was something they couldn't do, a movement, they would suggest an alternative, and it would probably be more challenging than what the actual, yeah, I'll just, you know, throw a forward walkover in, okay. But they were like quite mature actually to kind of suggest alternatives. I found that the little ones got overwhelmed by the creative tasks. They didn't quite understand them, but as soon as I would pair them up, there would be like a whole show created in 10 minutes. So them working together with someone their age really supported. And I realised that there was so much that could be done from this point, you know, looking at narrative, musicality, qualities. So that's something that I'm really going to take forwards into the next stage. And this is just some of their reflections. So we ended with written feedback as well, which they would never do as part of their dance session. So I was really interested as to how they would respond to that. Hopefully you can see, but I'll just read one out. This workshop made me realise how to feel and add more emotion in my dancing. I enjoyed the contemporary routine. I'm a freestyle dancer who is good at pirouettes. Freestyle dance has given me confidence. I'd ask them to say, I'm a freestyle dancer who ... So my learning from doing all this work and things that I think could be valuable to others. So I guess my background and my experience was really supportive in going back into that community and creating a genuine connection with them. So with myself and also with my producer, Sarah, it was, you know, that's another thing where if your producer doesn't really understand the community you're working with, then that might make the tensions harder. But we had that experience and that knowledge to be able to speak to people and yeah, like really know what the community is. I would say, like, you have to start somewhere, so don't be afraid to get it wrong, because as you begin working with the community, if you listen to them, you can mold and adapt your project to make it work for both of you. But you won't know until you try. I think at first I was quite nervous, like, what's the right approach? But you'll find that if you listen and you work sensitively. For me, based on my values, if the teacher wasn't willing to be collaborative and open to what I was offering, I would in time accept that that's okay, and that maybe this is not the dance school that I'm going to have a really in-depth relationship with. And that was okay, because for me, it felt like that was an important part of my process, but also they need to feel like they're getting something out of it. And if they don't, then it's not going to be valuable. If you're genuinely working with the community in a way which shows them respect, your timeline will probably have to change to accommodate. That it just will. You need to respect that they are self-employed individuals running a business and factor that into your budget. So as I mentioned earlier, paying people the rates that we expect to be paid and covering everybody's costs, which will make it more expensive. Be prepared to take it slow and factor that time into your timeline. You can't also just drop the relationship, like in between, you know, now I'm in between a bid, my next bid, but I'm maintaining those relationships, and obviously that's my own time, but it could just be you're checking in with them over email, you're updating them where you're at, you're telling them of future plans, etc. When it goes wrong or not to plan, it's research. So try not to look at it as a failure, but acknowledge that this will inform your future planning. And enjoy it. Show them that you're passionate and excited. I think that was the biggest thing for us, is to just actually articulate like why we really, really want to work with them. Like, we're really excited about this. And we want to be part of the spaces that you're part of, and we want to help bring freestyle into new spaces. And also, yeah, act as a role model for it to be seen on professional stages as well. So that is everything. That concludes. I hope it was useful, and I'd really love to hear any questions, comments, feedback.
Great. So we've already got one question, Ella, from Joseph Jeffers. Yeah, go ahead, Joseph.
Hi, Ella. I thought that was incredible. Thank you so much. I felt as if you just went through my whole life, because I started in disco. I was trained by Anna Jones in Staffordshire, doing disco and freestyle. And at that time, it was one of the only ways to get into dance for someone who was working class. So one of the things I was quite curious, because it doesn't seem to be that much of a shift. In all the images you show, I didn't see that many people from the global majority. So are people from the global majority not part of that community, given that the areas that you identified were areas where there's high levels of people from the global majority and deprivation?
Yeah, it's really interesting. Obviously, there are a few kids who are of the global majority, but it's certainly not the dance form that seems to be really taking in those individuals. I don't know if that's to do with cultural differences, or maybe, you know, dance forms which more align with those individuals, but it is still, you know, I think it is very white. And I mean, I know that there is a freestyle presence in South Africa. But yeah, it's kind of not, I wonder if it's because it is in such like corners of each community, where there's not, there's not a lot of even advertising or marketing that a lot of schools do to bring people in. And I'm not sure that their thinking is to really, get those people in actually.
Thank you.
Other questions, curiosities, thoughts, comments from anyone else? Yeah, someone put their video on. Hannah Robert Shaw, did you want to ask a question? I think you did. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I don't know if it's a question or an observation, but thanks, Ella. That was brilliant, really interesting. I have some experience of this just from being a parent of two young girls that I took to a dance school in Shipley, and the competitive, like, I took them just because they love to dance, but the competitive element was like really, really like revealed itself, and it just made me think how the kind of that there seem to be, I don't know whether there's like two value systems almost sort of butting up against each other within the kind of private dance world and the sort of subsidized dance world. And the parent who just wanted my kids to love dancing, I found that quite hard to navigate, and those two spaces. And I wondered in this work if that kind of if that sort of slight friction between values became kind of quite an issue as you were working, and how you sort of navigated that.
In the making of the work or in the community work?
Either.
I mean, yeah, it makes you sort of don't realize how complicated it makes things until you're trying to go about doing things. So I get the sense that I mean, for me, it's challenging because it's not who I naturally am, actually. Even though I was in this competitive world, I'm not competitive in that way. Like, I like to really work with people and this kind of thing. But it makes it complicated. For example, it took a long time to find a freestyle costume designer. And that was because the only way with some costume designers will work with people is if you come from a teacher who they know and they work with, and they think, yeah, they're a really good dance school, their kids should wear my suits. If they would like endorse you or recommend you in that way, which for me was crazy. I was, offering to pay way more than what these parents would be paying for for a costume for the show. And I was just getting nothing back. Yeah, I don't know if that answers your question because I've gone a bit.
Yeah, I suppose it's that thing of like I think we're making quite good steps in terms of how inclusive we are as a subsidized dance sector, and I just wonder how that plays out in this landscape of freestyle. My personal experience was that it wasn't very inclusive, and it was the competitive element kind of bypassed the sense that this could be for anyone. But yeah,
I think for freestyle, the bit I would agree, but for freestyle, where it differs is you will have your competitive classes and you'll have your non-competitive classes in a dance school. And the non-competitive classes, it's like under 6 freestyle, they go learn a little dance to a pop routine. In those spaces, it's really inclusive, and it's inclusive in terms of they cost like £3 a class. But in terms of the competition side, there's like no slacking, basically. and you're expected to go very by the book in terms of how you go about things, how many lessons you have to do, what costumes you have to wear, etc.
I had a question, Ella. It's maybe sort of would need to be just a brief answer, even though I can see there's already lots of detail, but it's maybe leading on, which is about audiences, and because you're making a show, right? That's informed by your journey and also Disco Freestyle. And I just wondered if you wanted to say anything about sort of the audience for that work and sort of their experience, or who those audiences might be, because it struck me it's really quite interesting, the difference between watching a competitive dance art form and coming to see potentially a theatre show, and sort of what that contract is. And I was just kind of curious about that.
Yeah. I mean, the audience that we're hoping to attract are the freestyle dancers, in order to bring those into, you know, like you said, it is a very different contract, it's a very different space, and these spaces are spaces that they wouldn't normally go in. So we are hoping to bring freestyle dancers in, but it's also for contemporary dance audiences to learn more about this world. And to sort of really bring the detail to, like, basically the work is structured as a competition as it exists right now, so it's really bringing people into that kind of a space. But obviously there are different considerations, because, you know, we could have put it in a site-specific leisure centre and set it up as a competition, but it's not, because we've chosen for it to be presented in a black box theatre, which, you know, the audience will be seated, etc., etc. So it will have a different feel to it for sure in terms of that.
Great. And I think we've got time for one more question. I think it's Danielle who has got their hand up. Yeah, go ahead, Danielle.
Yes. Two things, a comment and a question. So I teach authentic American and European line dances from the 1970s. I am the only person that I know on the planet that does this. I'm the only disco freestyler at Move It, which is the biggest dance convention. And it seems that we're all working in isolation in the disco freestyle community. I'm happy to say to Joseph that because I teach over 60s, the global majority is very well represented amongst my classes, and especially in my soul train line classes, where people can bring their own dances and freestyling. But Ella, what do you recommend as a community, as how we can band together and work together to raise the profile of what we do?
Are you talking really from, like, people who are in freestyle?
People are in the dance community. People don't understand what I do.
Yeah.
And I can see that the freestyle competitive community seems to be also isolated. You know, with reference to the dance community itself. Why are there no other freestyle classes that Move It, which is the largest dance convention in the world, except mine?
Yeah. I think, you know, it's, I guess, you know, it's bringing. So part of me thinks that freestyle has gotten so protective, the individuals within it are so protective of what it is, that it's very individualistic, actually. So I know that there are people in freestyle. They've recently, some Matt Flint, who runs Can You Dance, is doing a freestyle day in September. But this again is very, like, it will only be the elite of the elite who are there, and a lot of dance schools won't go because they won't feel that they're welcome or good enough if they don't fit in with being the best of the best. But also it's you know, dance teachers get very not fragmented, but disjointed, because when they're, you know, the people who they bring through the schools who then want to go and set up their own dance school, it creates big tensions across the community. I think that's the biggest problem in freestyle, is that it's like all these falling outs around going off and doing your own thing, and a lot of, yeah, like protection over, like, I need to keep my students, I need to keep my business going, which is understandable in working class communities. But I think, yeah, but I mean, it's not really a very good answer, but like, I think trying to keep, if you're a person who wants to advocate for the form in that way, then putting yourself into, you know, into a space like this and talking about it and trying to go to organizations who don't understand it and talk about it more and help, you know, help people to yeah, like be educated about it, perhaps.
Thank you.
Sounds like there is a really rich like conversation, practice sharing, like more exchanges that can follow from here. Ella, I think people might be interested in connecting with your project as it goes on. I think we've signposted on the Place website how to find out more about you. So we are going to pause there, knowing that other conversations might happen offline. Just want to say a massive thank you to Ella for offering us such an interesting kind of window into a world which honestly I don't know so much about, and I'm really curious to learn more through development of your project. Thank you all so much for being with us. We're back next week with the second webinar in our series, which is with Amrita Hepi. It's around autobiography and performance, playing with fiction and destiny. And then every Wednesday following through to the 12th of June, we've got webinars about making your own soil and water, interdisciplinary collaborations, about writing care manifestos, about imagining audiences as partners in your work, and about care and holding dance and pastoral roles in our community. So I hope you guys, some of you will join us for those. And yeah, just leaves to say thank you so much and have a great afternoon, everybody. And we hope to see you at the next one. Thank you.